When we talk about discipline outlasting motivation, we're really talking about a shift in the way you interpret your own limits. Most people say they are tired, but what they truly are is unconvinced that they can push further, unconvinced that the discomfort is worth enduring, unconvinced that greatness demands sacrifice long before it delivers reward. What we call tiredness is often a negotiation with ourselves, a quiet compromise where we settle for the comfortable choice. And the danger is that comfort always disguises itself as legitimate rest. It whispers, "You deserve a break," even when you haven't earned the effort that would justify it. But discipline, real discipline, doesn't entertain that negotiation. It doesn't wait for the perfect mood or perfect moment. Discipline says, stand up and act, because action is the only bridge between who you are and who you claim you want to be. And when you begin to act from this place, you start to notice something remarkable. The body is far more capable than the mind initially admits. Fatigue becomes a suggestion, not a command. Your internal resistance softens under the consistency of your effort. You begin to understand that your energy expands when you act with purpose and contracts, when you surrender to excuses. Think about how many times you've told yourself you were exhausted, only to find a sudden burst of energy the moment something enjoyable came along. The same body that was too tired to work, study, pray, train, or build suddenly becomes alert when exposed to entertainment, distraction, or desire. This is proof, clear, simple proof, that the issue was not physical depletion, it was mental prioritization. Your body wasn't drained, your discipline was. Most people wait to feel motivated before they act, but motivation is like weather, beautiful when it's present, unreliable when you depend on it. Discipline is climate. It's the environment you construct through consistency, the identity you strengthen every time you do what is right over what is easy. Discipline is the quiet decision at dawn, the repeated choice at midday, the final push at night when no one is watching and no applause is coming. When you decide to live with discipline, you stop letting fleeting emotions dictate your effort. You stop surrendering your potential to temporary discomfort. You realize that the gap between your current self and your best self is filled with small, repeatedly uncomfortable actions. Discipline is the grind you do privately so that success can appear publicly. It is the refusal to let laziness disguise itself as legitimate fatigue. At some point, you have to confront the truth. You cannot become extraordinary by acting ordinary. You cannot achieve greatness while maintaining habits built for mediocrity. You cannot grow stronger while protecting your weaknesses. Discipline requires an honesty with yourself that is often uncomfortable. It demands that you hold yourself accountable even when others would excuse you. It asks you to push when you would rather retreat. And it forces you to admit that many of the limitations you embrace were never real to begin with. Think back to every moment you gave up early, every opportunity you allowed to slip away, every dream you postponed. How many of those decisions were actually caused by true exhaustion, and how many were simply because you didn't feel like pushing? The subtle tragedy is that we often choose comfort over growth, and then wonder why our life feels stagnant. We blame circumstances, timing, stress, other people, anything but the absence of discipline. But when you look around the world at every person who achieved something meaningful, something lasting, something powerful, you'll see one shared trait. They were disciplined long before they were successful. They were committed when no one cared, consistent when no one noticed, and determined when no one believed. Their lives were not shaped by bursts of motivation. They were shaped by daily acts of discipline repeated until excellence became their default. And yes, discipline is uncomfortable. It demands structure in a world built on distraction. It demands resistance to temptation in a time when indulgence is effortless. It demands patience in an age obsessed with instant results. But discomfort is the currency of growth. The pain you feel when you push yourself is the tax you pay for becoming someone stronger. You cannot escape that tax. You can only choose whether to pay it now or suffer the cost of regret later, and regret is far heavier than discipline. Regret doesn't fade. Regret settles into your memory and reminds you of what you could have been. Discipline, on the other hand, builds pride, quiet, steady, earned pride. It gives you the confidence of someone who showed up for themselves even on the days they didn't want to. It gives you the kind of strength that doesn't need to be announced because it is proven through action. To be disciplined means to show up when you don't feel ready. It means to do the work even when you're emotionally drained. It means to stick to your commitments even when excuses tempt you. It means choosing long-term benefit over short-term comfort. Once you understand this, you stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" and instead ask, "Is it necessary?" Because the truth is, necessity builds discipline, and discipline builds destiny. And somewhere deep inside you, there is a version of yourself that knows this. A version that is tired, not tired from effort, but tired of excuses. A version that is waiting for you to rise above your old patterns and give everything you're capable of. A version that wants to look back one day and say, "I didn't waste my time, I honored it." So the next time you're tempted to say you're tired, pause. Ask yourself, are you truly exhausted, or are you avoiding the discomfort required for growth? Are you protecting your potential, or are you surrendering it? Are you building discipline, or are you feeding excuses? Because your life, every step of it, will reflect the answer you choose. You're not tired, you're undisciplined, and the moment you accept that truth, everything begins to change. When we say that the dead are watching, it's not meant to be a dramatic statement. It is a reminder, a call to awaken something deep inside you. There were people who walked this earth before you, people who struggled, sacrificed, prayed, built, endured. People who carried burdens you never met, yet you benefit from their efforts every single day. Every path you walk on, every freedom you enjoy, every opportunity you have was shaped by hands that are now dust. And there is something profoundly humbling in realizing that your life is part of a much larger story, a story you did not begin, but one you are responsible for continuing with dignity. There is a weight to that, a noble weight, because their time is over, their chapter has already been written. But yours is still being formed with every decision, every action, every moment of discipline or its absence. And when you remember that, when you truly internalize it, you stop treating your life casually. You stop wasting your hours as though they are infinite. You stop acting as if you are invisible in the grand tapestry of history. You begin to see yourself as a link, an essential, irreplaceable link in a chain much larger than yourself. Imagine, for a moment, those who came before you observing your life, not in a literal sense, but in the sense that their legacy created the stage you now stand on. They endured hardship not so that you could live soft, aimless, distracted lives, but so you could rise higher, push further, live more consciously. They walked through storms so you could live under clearer skies, and the question that echoes from their sacrifices is simple: what will you do with what we gave you? That question alone should shake you awake. Because every day you say you are too tired, every time you give up on your goals, every moment you choose comfort over purpose, you are answering that question, often in ways that dishonor the very foundation you were handed. They crossed oceans, survived hunger, fled oppression, built homes with their bare hands, and carried faith in their hearts through trials you cannot even imagine. And here you stand, with opportunities they would have given everything to possess. How then can you allow laziness to shape your destiny? You are not merely living for yourself. You carry the echoes of countless souls whose dreams were never fulfilled. Some of them wanted the education you throw away casually. Some wanted the physical strength you waste by refusing discipline. Some longed for the freedom to choose their path, a freedom you take for granted each time you let excuses dictate your actions. And whenever you hesitate, whenever you falter, whenever you claim you are too tired to continue, you forget the cost at which your opportunities were purchased. Honor isn't built through grand gestures alone. It is built through the quiet, consistent commitment to live in a way that respects what was handed to you. When you push through the discomfort of discipline, you are not only building your character, you are paying tribute to those who had no chance to chase the dreams you have. You are turning their sacrifices into something meaningful, You are saying, your struggle was not wasted. I will continue the story you began. Think about the people in your lineage, those you know, those you never met, those whose names are forgotten yet, whose lives shaped your existence. They lived with responsibilities we cannot easily comprehend. They didn't have the luxury of procrastination. They didn't have the comfort of endless distraction. Their survival depended on discipline, resilience, and faith. And they carried that torch long enough for it to reach your hands. Now the torch is yours, and the question is, what will you do with its flame? When you feel unmotivated, remind yourself that there were people who worked until their bones ached simply because their families depended on them. When you feel overwhelmed, remember there were generations who faced challenges with no reassurance that relief would come. When you feel like quitting, recall that your ancestors persisted even in situations where quitting meant collapse. Their strength did not come from ease, it came from necessity, and yet here you are, living with more options, more comfort, more opportunity than they could dream of. So what justification do you truly have to hold back? There is a kind of accountability that grows within you when you view your life through this lens. You stop living in a bubble of self-centered excuses. You recognize that your choices ripple outward, not just forward into your future, but backward into your history. You validate or betray the sacrifices of those who came before you by the way you use the time that was granted to you. Every act of discipline honors them. Every act of laziness diminishes the gift. You don't have to be perfect. No one is asking you to carry the entire weight of history, but you must try, you must show up, you must put effort into the life you were given. Because the truth is, one day you will join the ranks of those who came before. One day your chapter will close and someone else will stand where you stand, benefiting from choices you made. And they will ask the same question, what did those before me do with their time? Make sure the answer is one that inspires them. When you frame your life in this way, discipline stops feeling like a burden and starts feeling like an inheritance. It becomes a form of gratitude, a form of respect. You wake up early not because you want to impress anyone, but because you understand the value of the day you've been given. You push through discomfort because you know that others push through far worse. You focus, you strive, you persevere because you realize that your life is part of something larger than yourself, a continuation of a story that began long before you were born. And there is a deep sense of dignity in that, a dignity that fuels you when motivation fades, a dignity that steadies you when life becomes difficult, a dignity that whispers, rise, keep going, honor what you've been given. That voice is not loud, but it is powerful. It is the voice of history calling upon you to live with intention. So when you feel yourself slipping into excuses, remember the countless souls whose footsteps echo behind you. Remember the hands that built the world you walk through. Remember the sacrifices that made your life possible. And remember that you are being watched not by critics or strangers, but by legacy itself. They pass the torch to you. Hold it high, live in a way that proves their struggle was not in vain. There comes a moment in every thoughtful person's life when they begin to understand something profound about time. It is not theirs. It was never theirs. It was loaned with purpose, loaned with expectation, loaned with an invisible condition written into the fabric of existence. And when you begin to see time as something borrowed rather than something you own, everything about the way you move through your days changes. You stop treating your hours casually. You stop pouring them into distractions that leave you empty. You stop acting as if life will simply wait for you to figure things out someday, because someday is not guaranteed. Not even the next breath is guaranteed. What you have in your hands is a temporary trust, something placed upon you with extraordinary delicacy, the opportunity to shape your destiny while the clock is still ticking. And when you view time through this sacred lens, you begin to ask yourself harder questions. What am I doing with the minutes I have? What am I doing with the strength I still possess? What am I doing with the chances that others prayed for but never received? When you treat time as a possession, you waste it. When you treat it as a gift, you guard it. When you treat it as a loan, you honor it. And honoring it sometimes requires confronting uncomfortable truths about how much of your time is spent drifting rather than deciding, consuming rather than creating, escaping rather than engaging, surviving rather than striving. The tragedy is not that people don't have enough time. The tragedy is that people don't know how to value the time they already have. They say, "I'm too busy," when they're really too distracted. They say, "I'll do it tomorrow," as though tomorrow is a promise. They say, "I'm too tired," because discipline feels heavier than excuse making, but time doesn't bend to excuses. Time doesn't wait for motivation. Time doesn't negotiate. It moves with or without you, and if you don't step into its flow with purpose, it sweeps past you, carrying your future along with it. There are people who lived centuries before you who would give anything for one more day, one more hour, one more chance to mend what they broke or complete what they started. People who spent their last moments wishing for time the way a thirsty person wishes for water. But you wake up every morning with a brand new day poured into your hands like a fresh scroll waiting to be written. And the question is, do you write something meaningful on it, or do you leave it blank with intention lost somewhere between procrastination and comfort? When you internalize the truth that your time is borrowed, you begin to approach your responsibilities differently. You begin to understand that you weren't placed here to simply exist. You were placed here to contribute, to grow, to build, to refine your character, to uplift those around you, to leave behind something worthy of being remembered, and none of that happens accidentally. None of that happens while drifting. It happens when you choose to live intentionally within the boundaries of your limited hours. Every morning you wake up is essentially a renewal, an extension on the loan. It is a sign that you have been given one more chance to get it right, one more chance to discipline yourself, one more chance to honor your goals, one more chance to silence your excuses, one more chance to pursue excellence with sincerity. But extensions don't last forever. Every soul eventually reaches its final deadline, and when that moment comes, the only thing that will matter is whether you honored the time you were given. People sometimes think the pressure of this reality is heavy, but in truth it is liberating. Because once you realize that time is limited, you stop waiting for permission. You stop postponing your growth, you stop giving fear the power to freeze you, you start acting, you start taking ownership. You start shaping your days instead of letting your days shape you. You begin to see each hour as an opportunity, not an obstacle. But to live like this, you must detach yourself from the illusion that you can afford to waste time. You must stop letting distractions consume the hours meant for your purpose. You must stop giving your energy to people, environments, and habits that drain more than they add. You must stop treating your future like a distant dream and start treating it like a responsibility that begins right now, in this very moment, with the choices you make. Your time is not meant to be scattered into 1,000 meaningless pursuits. It is meant to be invested. Invested in growth, invested in discipline, invested in becoming the kind of person who can carry the weight of their own potential. Invested in building something that outlives you, whether through character, contribution, or legacy. And the amazing thing is, once you start honoring your time, life begins to open up in ways you never expected. Discipline becomes easier, focus becomes sharper, clarity becomes more accessible. You begin to feel a sense of alignment between who you are and who you are trying to become. Because when you respect time, time begins to work in your favor. The pieces of your life begin to fit together with more purpose. Your goals stop feeling impossible and start feeling urgent. Your dreams stop feeling distant and start feeling reachable. You begin to live with a sense of dignity because you understand the value of each fleeting moment. But here is the truth. Honoring your time requires courage. Courage to say no to distractions. Courage to step away from aimlessness. Courage to push past comfort. Courage to hold yourself accountable. Courage to admit that you have wasted time in the past and to commit sincerely to doing better with the time you have left. And that courage begins with a simple recognition. You do not own your days, you are borrowing them. And borrowed things must be returned, ideally in better condition than they were received. One day, you will stand at the end of your life with no more minutes left to rearrange. And on that day, the only question that will matter is, did you honor the time you were given? Did you live in a way that reflected gratitude for the days you were loaned? Did you build something with your hours, or did you allow them to slip through your fingers unnoticed? Your time is borrowed, guard it, use it, honor it. There comes a point in every sincere seeker's journey when they realize that excellence is not an accident. It is not a gift handed to the fortunate. It is not a secret known only to a chosen few. Excellence is the natural result of self-governance, of learning to manage your impulses, command your emotions, regulate your desires, and direct your actions toward a purpose higher than comfort. And this is a truth many people avoid because self-governance demands honesty, it demands discipline. It demands the willingness to confront the version of yourself that prefers ease over effort, excuses over action, and stagnation over growth. When you look at anyone who has achieved anything meaningful, you will notice that their greatness didn't begin with talent. It began with discipline. It began with the small decisions they made day after day, decisions that seemed insignificant in the moment, but built the foundation for every success that eventually followed. Waking up early when staying asleep felt easier, speaking truth when silence felt safer, restraining anger when reaction felt justified, prioritizing long-term benefit over short-term indulgence. These micro-acts of discipline are what slowly construct the architecture of excellence. Self-governance means you stop waiting for inspiration to carry you. You stop relying on fleeting emotions to decide your actions. You stop allowing your circumstances to dictate your character. Instead, you become the one who decides how you will respond, decides what you will prioritize, decides how much effort you will give, decides what standards you will uphold. And once you accept that responsibility, your life begins to shift in ways that may feel uncomfortable at first, but transformative in the long run. The truth is, most people do not fail because they lack ability. They fail because they lack control over themselves. A person who cannot control their time will always remain at the mercy of distraction. A person who cannot control their anger will destroy their relationships. A person who cannot control their desires will sabotage their own future. A person who cannot control their tongue will speak themselves into regret. A person who cannot control their laziness will watch opportunities slip, past them again and again. Excellence requires mastery over the self, not mastery over others, and mastery does not happen overnight. It is cultivated slowly, deliberately, through deliberate repetition. It comes from waking up every day and choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. Choosing progress over pleasure, choosing purpose over procrastination, choosing to be the person you were created to become rather than the person you drift into being by default. You learn to say no to impulses that weaken you and yes to commitments that strengthen you. You learn to stop negotiating with your excuses and start negotiating with your potential. Self-governance also requires you to be brutally honest with yourself, to recognize when you are hiding behind distractions, to acknowledge when you are settling for mediocrity, to admit when you are using the word tired as camouflage for undisciplined habits. To own the fact that many of your limitations are not imposed upon you, they are tolerated by you. And once you embrace that level of honesty, you free yourself from the illusions that keep you stagnant. You begin to understand that your life is shaped not by what you occasionally do, but by what you consistently do. Excellence is not found in bursts of effort. It is found in the steady rhythm of disciplined action. It is found in the moments no one else sees, in the quiet hours where you choose to work, reflect, learn, improve, refine. Excellence is carved in private long before it is recognized in public, and there is something deeply empowering about that realization. Because it means greatness is not reserved for the extraordinary. It is available to anyone willing to govern themselves. Anyone willing to hold themselves accountable. Anyone willing to rise, to restrain, to push, to persevere. It means that your destiny is not waiting on external permission, it is waiting on internal discipline. But self-governance does not only elevate your goals, it elevates your character. It strengthens your humility because you recognize how much you must work on. It strengthens your patience because you learn to endure the long journey toward improvement. It strengthens your gratitude because you realize how much of excellence is built through the opportunities you've been given. It strengthens your relationships because discipline teaches you how to respond with wisdom rather than impulse. It strengthens your spirituality because a disciplined heart is more capable of sincerity, consistency, and devotion. The people who live undisciplined lives often appear free on the surface, but inside they are prisoners to their habits, their reactions, their whims, their distractions, their inconsistencies. But the disciplined person, though they appear strict with themselves, experiences a deeper freedom, a freedom born from control, clarity, and purpose. They are not carried by the waves of their emotions. They steer their own ship consciously, intentionally, with dignity. And yes, it is difficult. Self-governance demands effort, perseverance, and sacrifice. It requires you to fight yourself more than you fight anything else. It requires you to push past the discomfort of discipline until discipline becomes your comfort. It means doing the right thing even when your emotions are pulling you in the opposite direction. But the reward is profound. You become trustworthy within your own soul. You become someone who can rely on themselves. You become someone whose actions align with their values. This is the difference between a life built accidentally and a life built deliberately. Between drifting and directing, between wishing and becoming, between mediocrity and excellence. And every day, you are given the choice: either allow your impulses to govern you, or learn to govern yourself. Excellence requires self-governance, not because it makes life easier, but because it makes life meaningful. It turns every action into intentional growth. It transforms wasted time into purposeful effort. It allows you to rise above your weaker inclinations and live according to your higher calling. It teaches you that you do not need to be perfect. You only need to be disciplined. And in the end, the standard you hold for yourself becomes the legacy you leave for others. Excellence is built by those who govern themselves.